Teaching young people in Abiyan, Yemen to build walls has also built their sense of identity and community, says Lou Jane Kiki, a program officer with the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, or ICRD.
So we use this strategy to increase the resilience toward violent extremism, especially in communities with vulnerable youth.
2/3 of the youth surveyed in Abiyan told ICRD the program makes them less likely to join an armed group. A key feature of ICRD's approach is partnering with religious leaders to root out violent extremist ideology before it starts.
Religious leaders, if they have the capacity and awareness and the deep connections with their constituencies, they can detect early warning signs of radicalization.
Now ICRD is bringing the same strategy to houses of worship in 8 U.S. cities. James Patton is ICRD's president.
It's very important to identify messengers, key messengers who are seen as having authority and legitimacy, but then they can push back using doctrinal arguments and values-based arguments from their faith tradition to work against the use of violence to solve differences.
Patton says this approach is particularly critical as some right-wing activists use their Christian faith to justify violence, as they did during the Capitol Hill riots last January. Experts say the phenomenon is known as Christian nationalism and can mix with white supremacist beliefs like those of the Proud Boys. The goal for these groups is to keep the U.S. a, quote, white Christian nation. The FBI's Timothy Langan.
We assess that racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists advocating for the superiority of the white race and anti-authority or anti-government violent extremists, specifically militia violent extremists, present the most lethal threats.
Counterterrorism expert Vidhya Ramalingam argues that violent extremist ideologies share the same roots.
What it oftentimes comes down to is a need for belonging, a desire to be a part of something that's greater than oneself.
Ramalingam leads the Moonshot team, a technology startup which redirects those searching for online extremist information towards resources to gain employment and community.
We don't need separate mechanisms to fight jihadism. We don't need separate mechanisms to fight neo-Nazism. Ultimately, what we need here are very similar interventions.
And ICRD's James Patton says results will be clear.
The greatest measure of success for me would be to start seeing some nuanced arguments within identity groups where people say, you know what, just because I believe X doesn't mean I have to advocate for Y.
Both Ramalingam and Patton say it's time for the de-radicalization methods that have worked elsewhere to be deployed inside the United States. Jessica Stone, VOA News, Washington.